Hey everyone, Thyworm here, bringing you a solo self-found guide for crafting. In this series I will talk about beginner-friendly, SSF-friendly crafting methods, and today it is all about fractured items. There are many ways to use fractured items, but first let's talk about what fractured items are. What separates fractured items from regular items is a locked or fractured affix. You can easily tell by looking at the item. It has a special icon, meaning it is fractured. But more apparent than the icon, it also has a golden affix. No matter what you do with the item, this affix will never change. You can throw chaos orbs at it, which normally rerolls all affixes, but the fractured affix will never change. I am not able to confirm that using Val orbs on an item also keeps the fractured affix. It looks like it from this small batch of testing, but the wiki doesn't seem to mention it at all. Not that it matters, you wouldn't just randomly use a bunch of Val orbs on these items anyway. But hey, if you know, post it in the comments. The reason why fractured items are so good is perhaps obvious, but it is still good to mention. Let's imagine you have a regular item, and by using a chaos orb you want to craft on it. If you just keep using chaos orbs on an item, you get up to 6 random affixes with random tier rolls each time. The odds of all those 6 affixes to be decent, including decent rolls, are very low. That is why using chaos orbs to craft is typically a bad idea. If you would use chaos orbs, however, on a fractured item, which has one locked or fractured affix, you only need to randomly roll up to 5 affixes. Going from 6 to 5 is a pretty huge difference. It is in theory, for the sake of the argument, around 15% easier to craft. This part is not about the exact math, but I hope you get the point. If you would benchcraft the 6th affix instead of trying to roll it randomly, you only need to roll 4 decent affixes plus an open affix, making it once again easier. If you would not use a chaos orb, but for example something that guarantees an affix, like an essence, you gain even more control over your item. You have a guaranteed fractured affix. You have a guaranteed affix from using an essence. And you can still use a benchcraft on top of it. And suddenly you control half of the affixes on the item and you're only gambling for the other half of the affixes. Fractured items are so powerful, not just because they guarantee a single affix, but because they make crafting exponentially easier by using the right components, which are mostly essences. Because fractured items are very powerful, it is not all that easy to get them. But there are a few ways which are rather deterministic and accessible, and some that aren't all that accessible, but I'm still going to tell you. The first thing that should be mentioned is that typically new league mechanics tend to include specific rewards, and it is very possible that the new Settlers of Kaldor expansion offers fractured gear as a reward for participating in the league mechanic. This league, Necropolis, there were 2 ways introduced to get fractured items. One was by using the All Flame members, filling maps with monsters that drop fractured gear, and another was graveyard crafting. Then it may be possible that GGG changes how many monsters populate maps that simply drop fractured gear. Around the time of Arch Nemesis, fractured gear was incredibly common. The drop rates have since been nerfed, and from regular maps I hardly ever find fractured gear anymore. The only node on the Atlas tree that seemed to help is invasive adversaries, increasing monster difficulty and rewards. This is purely anecdotal evidence, but during League start I played without this node, and after a few weeks I specced into it and I saw significantly more fractured items. Moving on to more reliable ways that likely exist in the new leagues too. Up first, Heist. Love it or hate it, I understand, but each generic room in Heist when it comes to armor, weapons, jewelry has a high chance of dropping synthesized or fractured gear. Typically, they drop both. Heist requires some setup, of course, but it is good to mention. In fact, all extra content, meaning basically other league mechanics like Legion, can drop fractured gear. I personally find Heists to be a very steady source of them, and I enjoy running Heist. But Blight Chests, Legion monsters, and probably also rogues with those generic reward icons on top of their heads, they can all drop fractured gear. Pretty much as long as you see those icons in any league mechanic, including Delirium, you are good to go. Up next, using fractured orbs. These are quite unobtainable, in all honesty, in solo self-found, at least in this league. They're incredibly rare, but it is worth mentioning that by doing the Harbinger mechanic, you have a small chance of dropping fracturing shards, and after collecting 20 of those they turn into a fracturing orb, which can be used on any rare weapon with 4 or more affixes, and it will randomly fracture one of those 4 affixes. It's good to know, but unless you play like at least 100 hours or more, or unless GGG changes the drop rates, which is not likely to happen, you will likely not be using this. Then a very interesting method, one that is very usable in Solar Self-Found, it is the Horned Scarab of Awakening. This scarab is pretty nuts, because what it does is after you put it in the map device, you get a load more map device options to choose from. You need to scroll down to see them though. One of those options is Imbued Anarchy, which adds some rogues to the map, but it also gives all rogues a 20% chance to drop a fractured item. This is pretty insane. It's not that hard to get 15 rogues in your map, and they don't just drop one item because you have item quantity bonuses typically, right? They tend to drop a handful or even more. You see me running a map using the scarab plus a few anarchy scarabs, which are very common, and you should realize I'm running a very strict filter at this point. Most of the fractured gear doesn't even show up, only tier 1 items do. In a league start scenario, I would have all fractured items enabled on my filter, and just one Horned Scarab of Awakening would be enough to get a steady supply of fractured items for all your crafting needs. Let's hope this scarab survives the patch notes, but it is one to remember in Solar Self-Found. You can use my unique farming atlas tree as well, see the links to all my SSF resources in the video description. Before we start crafting, I want to make you aware of a few limitations regarding fractured items, and I am omitting some limitations here that you would not use in a Solar Self-Found scenario. So, some limitations. Fractured items cannot be turned into unique items with an Orb of Chance. Fractured items cannot be given an influence like Shaper or Elder or Veritania. However, they can have Eldritch implicit modifiers on them, which is good to realize. Existing influence items also cannot be fractured using a fracturing orb. Other than that, barring some quite niche crafting things I have omitted from the video, we're all good to go. I've explained already in the introduction why fractured items are so powerful. Specifically, what you're looking for are high-tier fractured affixes such as life, resistances, spell suppression, and movement speed. If you guarantee one of those on an item already, plus you guarantee another affix by using an essence, such as the life essence, plus you craft some more resistances using the bench, you have got a great way to craft powerful gear without needing much knowledge at all. If you need essences, by the way, you do find them occasionally here and there, but ideally you just run a bunch of essence nodes on the atlas tree. There's no real way around it. For a steady supply, this is the way to go. You can use other currencies as well. You are not limited to essences, of course. For example, delve crafting works too, but delve crafting is much less deterministic and I feel much more complicated. There's the harvest crafting or hoardy crafting, which we will use on one item. It's viable, I would say. And you could Chaos Orb spam or even use Alteration Orbs, but again, it's way too tedious, I think. Instead, I've got plenty of examples with essences in store for you. Starting with a few helmets. Those are fairly easy to craft. A lion pelt. Evasion-based items are amazing because they can roll spell suppression, keep that in mind. It has a high tier fractured lightning res. We spent the same essences on it, hit that sought after spell suppression roll, finish it off with some more defenses, converting incoming physical damage into elemental damage. You can unlock this craft from Betrayal Field mods, slam it for a bit of extra evasion, use 20 armorer scraps, use Eldritch currency in later stages of the league, and voila, again a great helmet, it's super easy. The last helmet, a pig-faced bassinet, this one has a fractured life mod. Again, the same essences, no reason to change that. We hit another spell suppression, some strength, which can be incredibly useful, and all that is left is a bench craft, same as before. We slam using an exalted orb, getting probably the worst result ever, but it's okay. Use armor scraps to improve the quality, Eldritch currency to taste, and you are done. On to the next category that is pretty easy to craft, gloves. Starting with these Hydra Skill gauntlets, with a fractured resistance mod, and once more the Screaming Essences of Hatred are our preferred essence. We are looking for resistances, life and spell suppression. This one takes a few more tries, which happens, but again we end up with a triple res item. Craft life using the bench, use some armor scraps, some Eldritch currency if you have it, And here's another very serviceable item. Then, Assassin's Myths with Fractured Spell Suppression. Let's use life essences this time, the Screaming Essence of Greed. That means we're looking for resistances mostly, as spell suppression and life are guaranteed. Or perhaps attributes, if you are an attribute stacking build. We take a few more tries, but ultimately end up with decent resistances. We craft more resistances on it using the bench, slam for some lightning attack damage, improve the quality, and done. We'll do a few more, now using boots. You are looking for either a Fractured Life, Movement Speed, Resistance or Spell Suppression affix. I have Fractured Chaos Res, which is incredibly strong. I'm spamming it with life essences until we hit 2 more high tier resistances. Craft the Movement Speed on it. It's not the best roll, but I think it's reasonable. Slam it for some increased evasion, use armor scraps, get some more movement speed with Eldritch Currency, and yet again a more than decent item. Then a ring. With this one we're trying to get attributes for an attribute stacking build. Pick an essence that provides either strength or dexterity, as intelligence is already the fractured mod. These mods are easy to hit because attribute rolls are super common. I benchcraft life on it, I slam it for some energy shield, and you have a decent ring once again. The next item is a bit of a fun one, because here I'm rolling a mod I've never seen before in my life. Level 1 Convocation on a minion shield. That's pretty good. You almost always use Convocation to have your minions return to you, so I thought just sharing this information. I had no idea this mod is even craftable, and perhaps you didn't either. I do want to show another way of crafting, however, not just using essences, but instead using the Horde crafting station. The juice or fuel used in these crafts you get from doing harvests and killing beasts. I typically use this method on fractured items that have fewer affixes, like jewels. This Viridian jewel, which drops from Heist, has a fractured 7% life. That's great. Something that would be amazing to roll are resistances or critical strike affixes, or perhaps damage over time multiplier for dot builds. Using the critical horde crafting option, you guarantee at least 1 critical modifier, sometimes even more, and it's really not that difficult to roll a double crit multiplier, or a crit chance and a crit multiplier affix, as you can see me do time and time again using this system. So think about which modifiers you would like on an item like this and simply use the horde crafting bench. I won't go into delve crafting, I hardly use it myself. Getting the materials is tough, and I feel without having third-party websites open you can't craft anything, and for that reason I just don't use it all that much. Also, it doesn't guarantee affixes compared to essences or harvest crafting. And that's it. I hope you try out crafting on fractured items. I think it's a fun mechanic. You can get very decent loot in league start scenarios, as you can tell, and even in late and mid league scenarios too. Let me know what you think. Also let me know if you have any suggestions. I will pin those in the comments for everyone to see. Subscribe and like for more PoE SSF content. Thanks so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, guys, and also for making it to the end. Love you all. See you soon. Bye bye.